so we're back to this again. So I had two problems. I had a problem with the clutch switch, obviously. That was a secondary problem, not the primary problem. So I replaced that because it wasn't actuating, and I showed you that through the test that I did to it. We had the same problem where it died on the road again, and the throttle pedal wasn't working, same fuse was blown. And this clutch switch actually was stuck closed. So like right now, that clutch switch is activated and it's stuck closed, so it'll start without pushing the clutch down, so I have to get another one of those. But the problem was not that the clutch switch was bad. The problem is that there was a short and it burnt out the clutch switch. I think this one here, it fused it because of the short. So same thing, truck wouldn't start, so I unplugged the switch there, and then that fuse didn't blow again. So I tried to jump those two wires. I assumed maybe the fuse, or maybe this, we just got a bad one. So I jumped those two wires and it blew the fuse again. So I followed that wire up. It goes up here under the dash. These wires are all numbered. I mean, you can see the numbers on them. So I had to follow the number, and it comes up through this connector here, and it's this wire here. So I unplugged this connector and I checked for ground. So I had one end of the meter hooked to ground, and I was probing these. So I probed this wire here on this side and I wasn't getting a short, and then I probed on this side and I was getting a short again. So I was having a path to ground. So I continued on. So this goes up into the main harness and it runs back across, and then it goes, I don't know if I can show you, but it's in the back. You see there's a little wire behind the, you're not going to be able to see it, I'm sure. Well, you can. Right there, it goes through the firewall, and so I followed that through there. Same wire. Now these wires, they change numbers through the connectors here, through some of them anyway. So we followed it out, and here's the connector here. So I unplugged this connector and I found the pin, and I checked it for ground there, and I didn't have the short inside the cab, and I had the short on the outside of the cab. So we came out of here, and I didn't know where the wire went. I was just following the pink wires, because obviously we were on the side of the road and everything's wrapped, so it's really difficult to just cut everything open on the side of the road. So I'm following these wires around, and I ended up finding right here, this was the connector that wire entered. So I unplugged this connector, and this wire goes into the cab because I checked for continuity from here to the wire on the clutch switch in the cab, and I had continuity here. And on this side I didn't have continuity, so I knew this was the part of the harness that continued on. So I followed this wire, and I started checking for abrasion, places that were rubbing, because obviously you had a short. And I started moving the harness around, and eventually I bumped it so that it wasn't shorting out anymore. So we ended up getting it started, and we brought it back, and I continued looking around because obviously I had to find the short. So I initially thought it was this little bracket right here because it was pretty hard into the harness, but it wasn't where it was. And as I moved it around, I found this spot right there. You can see where the rubbing is on the intake, and where the piece of rubber is there. That's where my short was. It was on the bottom of that harness, and it had just barely rubbed through to the point where you could almost see the copper of the wire. I mean, it was so faint. It was, I mean, it was very, very small. And I ended up finding that. So I took the meter, I ran one probe to the clutch switch, that wire there, and then I just dragged it along the bottom of that wire, and I was getting continuity to that pink wire there. So that's where my problem was. So the short was right here. And I got to imagine that if you have an International, you might have an issue right there with abrasion, because this one did. And there's also some other rubbing on, like this big harness here where it was rubbing on the intake. But yeah, basically, I mean, I just had to keep looking for the pink wires out here to kind of trace where that wire went, because it's very difficult to find these with these tiny little numbers on there. And it does change as it goes through different connectors. So I figured I'd come back, as the video I made probably a week or two ago, and yeah, we just had this problem again recently. So now it is fixed. So I figured I kind of owed you a little bit more of a, not an explanation, but the final outcome of what it was, because I was kind of a little, not skeptical, but I was kind of wondering myself how that clutch switch would have failed where it was blowing the fuse like that. I mean, it didn't necessarily make sense to me, but that doesn't mean that isn't what happened. So anyway, so that's what happened. And yeah, hopefully I mean, that's an area I'm hoping, if someone's got some type of issue like that, that's where I would look, some type of abrasion. But basically I just went connector to connector, tracing the wire until I found where it was shorted, pretty much. I just kept checking each end of the connector for continuity ground, and in the end I found it. So hope that can help somebody. Thanks for watching.